Hello and welcome to Blender Bite Size. In this video I'll be showing you how to make this material procedurally in Blender. Feeling lazy? You can support this channel and skip the hard work by grabbing the blend file for this material from Gumroad for just £1. Feeling flush? Feel free to throw some of that coin my way using the coffee link in the description below the video. Okay, let's make a start on this burger material. So all of the bump and the texture and everything else we're going to create procedurally. So what I'm actually using as the base is a straightforward cylinder. So from the mesh menu, cylinder, then just adjust it so that you've got quite a lot of topography, and then bevel the edge a bit. That's all you really need to do to that cylinder. For the rest of it, I've just got the basic background with a light pointing at it, then 3 lights focusing on the object itself, and then the camera. So let's switch over to the shading view. We've got viewport shading enabled, and of course I'm using cycles and GPU for the render. Low samples count as well of 256. I'm going to disable denoising as well, because actually some of the noise really adds to the texture. So let's make a start. Now I've already applied a principled shader to this and plugged it into the material output. And we've got a fair bit to add. So the first thing that I'm going to do is add a noise texture. So Shift A, search for the noise texture and add that. And plug that directly into the base color. Got a little bit going on already, but there's lots to do yet. Next up, we're going to add a color ramp in between that and the principled shader. And we are also going to add a mapping node and a texture coordinate to the noise texture. If you haven't got Node Wrangler add-on enabled, you can search for them individually. Alternatively, press Ctrl T while you've got the noise texture enabled. And we are going to change the output from the texture coordinate to object. And you can see that disperses it nicely over the surface of the object. Now for the color ramp, we are going to flip that color ramp, and then we're going to bring the black value in to around 0.53, and the white value we are going to put at, let's say, 0.35, and that gives us this nice mottled look. Next up, duplicate the noise texture and the color ramp. Plug the vector from the mapping node into the vector of the noise texture, or the second noise texture, sorry. We are then going to mix these, so you can either add a mix node, a mix RGB, or again, if you've got the Node Wrangler enabled, Node Wrangler add-on enabled, press Ctrl Shift on your keyboard, right click on one of the color ramps and drag it up to the other. And we're going to set this to add. We're going to bring those colors maybe one stop, so 0.63 on the black and 0.25 on the white. So now you can see we've got the sort of darker intense areas and then the grayer lighter areas that this one is generating. But what I'm going to do is use this top one as the factor. Then I'm going to bring this one into color 1 slot, and here I'm going to use a particular color, and it's going to be this darkish brown. So the values for that are hue of 0.02, saturation 0.975, and value of 0.044, or hex value 3B1204. Okay. Next up, we're going to duplicate those two, the bottom two, from the noise texture and the color ramp. And I'm going to mix these bottom two together. Make sure to plug the vector into the vector. And then for this mix node, we're going to choose screen. And in this particular color ramp, we're going to add the colors that we want to use. So I'm going to flip that back, bring the black and white value out, and add another one. So for this, I'm going to use a brownish value, 3B1204. Actually, no, I'm not. Going to use that here. For the middle value, I made a bit of a whoopsie. For that first value, we are going to use the hex value 350D06, so it's quite a dark brown. For the middle value, hex code of 552C20. And then for the final value, hex code of 9D765E. And we're going to bring that brownish value into 0.15 and the lighter one to 0.85, and this one should be 0.5 right in the middle. Now for these, I'm going to use this color ramp as the factor, and then for color 1 we're going to go to pure black, so just drag it all the way down. So now we've got the browns and blacks going on. Looks fairly straightforward so far. Don't worry, we'll absolutely create a mess very shortly. Okay, we're going to duplicate the texture again, making sure to plug the vector in. And then on this bottom color ramp, we are going to reset the color ramp, add a third color, flip it, and change this middle value to 0.01, so a very dark grey, and move the white value to position 0.2. Now we need to plug that in somewhere. So where? We're actually going to use this value to control the roughness. So just plugging it in there. And we're going to duplicate this color ramp and chuck it in the middle. Now we've got to change the values on the scale and the details shortly, but we're going to do that via math nodes. So hang fire with me for a minute or two. Next up, duplicate the noise texture yet again. Plug the vector in. And this time take the factor and plug it directly into the normal value of the principled shader. Then search for and apply a bump node in between those. And set the strength to 0.75 and leave the distance at 1, but make sure that input is going into the height. Okay, so that's giving us a nice range of texture and roughness. which I think is working quite well. It's basically the roughness is the grease settling in the little pits of that. So let's add a bit more texture with some displacement, and that would obviously go into the material output here. For that we are going to need yet another noise texture. Plug the vector in. This time I will set these values here and now. So we're going to go for a scale of -6, detail of 2.5, roughness of 0.65, and a distortion of 0. Let's plug that into the displacement now, and that creates an absolute mess. So, just like the bump node, we have to convert the output from the noise texture into displacement information for the material output. So for that, we're using the displacement node. Much better. Now the height is what we need for the input. The mid-level we're going to set as 0, and the scale 0.05. Now to control that a bit more, we are going to use a color ramp that goes in between the two. And we're basically going to bring the white value over a bit, and you can see what happens to the burger. It sort of inflates a bit. So bring that white value to, let's say, 0.7. Okay, we're getting there. Bit more to do now with these noise textures to get them to do what we want to do. And we've got something else to add here as well. Okay, so for the subsurface, we're going to go with 0.01. And we need a color to go into there, so I'm going to get an RGB node, although to be honest I could have just controlled it with this. Plug this into the subsurface color. And then set the saturation at 0.75 and the value at 0.005. Oops. So it's a nice dark red, which is giving us nice deep tones in there. Now while I'm over here and I can see it, on this principled shader, the specular value decreased to 0.025. And what that's doing is taking away the overall shininess and leaving us with those sort of greasy pools. That sounds disgusting, doesn't it? Increase your specular tint to 0.5 as well. Okay, right, so let's get some scaling going on over here. Now this is going to get a little bit confusing unless we're very careful. So we're going to need two value nodes. The first value node we're going to use as the texture scale. So by adding the label, it changes over here, so we can always remember what it is when we come back to that. And we're going to set that at 5. For the second one, we're going to go for texture detail as the name. And we're going to set that at 2.5. Now we are going to need 4 math nodes. So let's get one and then just duplicate it 4 times. Now the texture scale, we're going to plug into the top one and then the bottom 2. And it's the top slot in each one. And then texture detail, we're going to take into this second one down. The value that we want to add here is 2, but it's not actually add, it's multiply. And then again, we need multiply on the second math node with a value of 2. We need another multiply on this third one with the value of 3. And then we need a subtract value. With a value of 3. Right, now anything that gets plugged in from the scale needs to go into scale on one of these noise textures. But we've also got some that are going to go in as they are. So for the top noise texture, we're going to take the scale value straight into the noise texture node. For the second noise texture down, we're going to take this. For the third noise texture, we're going to take this third math node. Oops. And then this final one, the subtract, is going to go into this bottom one. Now then, let me just make sure we're right. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Yep. Let's move that one over there so it doesn't confuse us. In fact, let's move it out the way. I beg your pardon, I made a bit of a boob. The third math node needs to go into the scale of 2 noise textures, and then this last one, the subtract, goes into the scale of the 5th noise texture down. So it's looking good so far, isn't it? We've also got to deal with the texture detail. So the texture detail that gets plugged into the math node here, this multiply, that is going to get plugged into the detail slot of the second noise texture down, and then the detail on every single other one is going to be drawn straight from that value node. Told you it'd be a bit of a mess by the end of it. Now, did you follow that? It is a bit of a mess, I'm afraid. Now, you could have grouped these and done an input value for it, but to be honest, who's going to see this? Anyway, that is pretty much us done. So let's render this out and take a look. Now, it's not bad, but I have noticed a couple of times when I've done this, the subsurface seems to be picking up the geometry of the shape. So if we pop back and let's just adjust that to 0.005, still picking it up a little bit. Let's see if that change makes a difference. Okay, there we go. It's kind of helped. I can still make it out just a little bit on this screen just because it's so freaking huge. I've designed this burger at 1.5 meters. Obviously, if you're using a smaller one, you'll need to adjust the scale and everything to match. But once you start looking at it further away or whatever, really doesn't make a difference. So I hope you have enjoyed that and haven't got lost with all those nodes. If you have, do feel free to go back and watch it over. It is a little bit complicated, but once you get it right, just those 2 values to adjust and you should be good to go. Please remember to give the video a thumbs up before you head off, and of course subscribe for future content. In the meantime, thanks for watching.